Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bellevue College XR Lab podcast. Today, we are joined with our guest, Dr. Paul Jackson, but I'd like us to go around and introduce ourselves to the camera individually once more. So I am John Thaler. I'm one of the co-hosts for today. I run the technology side, and we are here in the Q studio, running out of our podcast version of the studio. And I'm very excited to be talking with our guest here today. With me, we have
Bruce Wolcott. I'm XR Lab faculty lead and co-manager, and we're doing podcasts now in a way that we haven't been before, thanks to John's efforts here at the lab. And I'd like to introduce Paul. If you could tell us about yourself, Dr. Jackson.
Yes, I'm a 55-year-old retired African-American male who spent 20 years working at Boeing after I got my PhD in computer engineering. I did 3 summer internships while I was working on my degree. And then when I finished, they hired me. So I was in a group that did augmented and virtual reality applications for Boeing. Did that for like a couple of years, switched to digital video. So
yeah, thank you for your introduction. All right, so to start this off, Bruce, I think that I want to ask, how did you two meet each other? Where did this all start?
So, Dr. Jackson, you want me to start, and then you could fill in the gaps here. So this was quite interesting. I've had a long-term interest, as Dr. Jackson has, in VR, and one of those areas has to do with video, VR video, and so both of us were attending a workshop on 360 video, and everyone had to join up into a group within the workshop and take on an assignment of some kind. And so you and I got our 360 camera, and then we decided to cover the homeless encampment that was being set up at the University of Washington. That's my recollection.
Well, to clarify, it wasn't a workshop. It was a 48-hour film challenge. And so like every quarter or so, there'd be a group of people in Seattle that got together to talk about shooting a 360 video. And then the winner of the pitch was able to get a 360 video, and you have 2 days to 48 hours to film it, edit it, and produce it. And so I had the idea of shooting the homeless encampment in Seattle, and I pitched it, and I think it won, and Bruce came on with me, and we did it. And so, yeah, and so that's where we officially met. But then we met again a couple of years later in Verbella.
That's correct. Right? We did.
Yeah.
And so the thing that made it interesting, that was where I first discovered your long-term interest and involvement in social justice issues and documentation, especially of the African American communities in Seattle and now Tacoma. And that's also a kind of a parallel universe beyond VR and other interests that you have. So I found that that was a great insight into what your interests are.
Yeah. And I think that actually brings it perfectly around to why we're here today. We just came off of a full presentation with Dr. Jackson here, and you were talking about Seattle and Tacoma Black history, right? And you showed us a bit of a Google Earth tour. Can you tell us a bit about the presentation and sort of what you covered in brief?
Yeah, so after I finished my degree out of Texas, I got hired by Boeing, moved to Seattle, and did 20 years of research. Also, though, during that time, I was still videotaping people slowly, but eventually, after about maybe 2009, I think, is when it really kind of kicked off. And then I went through all the different types of cameras, but I was kind of focusing on our story. I am African American. My mom is from South Carolina. My father's from like Philadelphia. And so because of my mom being so close to the coast, she's considered one of those Gullah Geechee African Americans. That's where the Hazel eyes come from. And so I think, and she was also heavily involved in the whole civil rights what's it called, segregation movement back in the day. I think she got arrested actually too. And she's a twin, the oldest of 10 in her family, and she graduated from South Carolina State University. Went on to get and work as a civilian for the Army, and spent like 30 years working for the Army as a civilian. And during that time, we moved almost every 3 years. So it was interesting upbringing as a single kid, kind of military brat light in a way. And so, yeah, but I always had this fascination with our history, African American history in particular.
Yeah. And you had the wonderful opportunity to cover a little bit about your background. And then afterwards, you brought us through a Google Earth tour that you put together, right?
Right. Yeah, because when I transitioned out of the corporate world, so to speak, I was volunteering with some nonprofits and some personal people sharing their stories. One of the group's nonprofits is a Multimedia Resource Training Institute. It was a studio that was run by an Ethiopian immigrant. And so, and they were located at the Promenade, which is 23rd and Jackson. And during that time, it was okay. But then around, was it 2011, I think, Vulcan bought the block where Red Apple was at the corner of 23rd and Jackson. They tore it down and rebuilt up like 300 some odd unit apartments there. But it wasn't just Seattle at 23rd and Jackson. It was up and down 23rd and Union with the Liberty Bank building and some other places, even downtown Seattle. So yeah, I've always had an interest in real estate and just, I won't say wealth, but it's all about the money, right? Capitalism.
Yeah. So when was that purchase made from Vulcan in the Central District? What year was that?
Oh my goodness. That must have been 2013, 14. I have to Google it. Give me a second. Let me see. Vulcan purchases 23rd and Union.
Here's some results from the web.
All right. 500. Okay, here you go. Oh, Seattle Times. I don't know if I get Seattle Times. So this is dated 2016.
Not that long ago.
Yeah.
No.
So that was one of the issues that seemed to come up in or areas of conversation in the aftermath of your presentation was the gentrification of the Central District. But I'm thinking that must have been happening before the Vulcan purchase, right?
Oh yeah. Seattle had like a 50-year plan. So yeah, I mean, that's what capitalism is all about. Yestro Terrace is a perfect example.
It's not a brand new issue, right? This has been happening over the last 50 years.
Plus, I mean, since slavery, really, think about it.
Absolutely.
Capitalism. Yeah, but I was talking about Yestro Terrace. Yestro Terrace was the first racially integrated low-income housing in the country, but it was really located really close to downtown. So at the time, they give it to the immigrants, they give it to people low-income and stuff. But then when traffic became really, really bad, people wanted to move closer to downtown. Perfect spot, Yestro Terrace. So yeah, and so yeah, horror stories of people, immigrants, and low-income people who lived there. And since it was part of the Seattle housing, they had to take it over, which means displacing those people as they do the rebuild. But then the rebuild takes 2 or 3 years. What happens in that time? During that time, a lot of people either died or left, couldn't come back. So it's one of those things. So capitalism at its best.
Before we see your Central District Google Earth presentation, I'm wondering if you could give us a little bit of background, because you chose this as a presentation medium for this Black history, Seattle Black history, and now Tacoma. What made you to decide to take this route, and then what is it exactly?
With Google Earth, right?
With Google Earth,
yeah. Google Earth, yeah. That's interesting. I don't know why I picked Google Earth. I mean, it's I guess it's archival, because with the Pro version, desktop version, you can look at their satellite views for previous years, previous months. And so it's really kind of fascinating to see how your landscape would change because of things being rebuilt or being built. So yeah.
it helps with like the documentation and the archival part of your presentation in recounting Seattle and Tacoma's Black history in a visual way that
Right,
Google Earth is supplementing.
right, right. And again, Seattle, I mean, a lot of people don't think a lot of people, Black people, live in the Pacific Northwest. We do. And so, I mean, and there's been, I always say, every single aspect of American culture has been affected by somebody who's either born, lived, or died in Seattle. And so, I mean, earlier today, during my presentation, we were talking about people like Quincy Jones, Ray Charles, um, Jimi Hendrix. That's just musically. But there's also people like Bruce Lee. Not music, he's Asian, but he's still a world-renowned person that spent some time here in Seattle, and his gravesite, I think, is in Seattle or Renton, someplace. But yeah, I mean, Seattle is, and Tacoma has some really, really interesting history from the African American people of color. So
Yeah. Before we transition into this next part, I got one last question about the presentation itself for you. And that is, what do you think the highlight of that presentation was in your eyes? What part of it made you feel the best?
ooh, that's a good question. Because I mean, as an artivist, not an activist or an artist, but an artivist, to be able to have this technology capture a moment of time. And so I go around and do street interviews with people. And so one of the street interviews was with a gentleman who had a park dedicated to his family, literally right across the street from Mount Zion. Mount Zion is one of the oldest Black churches in Seattle. And so in our discussion, he was talking about, I think, his grandfather, who was one of the first senators elected. And so it's just amazing to be able to have that story and share it and keep it recorded to be able to be, just, it was just timing, So, yeah. So let's go ahead and jump to that.
Yeah,
Okay. So,
please.
So I'm going to share on the screen. Which one going to share?
Yeah, I think that the Google Earth view that you use really does supplement your presentation quite well, as you're talking about the kind of change over time as the gentrification of Seattle and Tacoma have happened. Okay, let's take a look. What do you have to show us here today?
So you should be seeing the Google Earth tour. I'm looking at Seattle, looking at Garfield, but what I want to go to is go to Clayton Corner Park. So you saw the move from Tacoma to Seattle, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So again, Clayton Corner Park is across the street from Mount Zion. And so it goes Mount Zion here, but right across the street is Clayton Corner Park. And in this little drop down here, there's a link to the Seattle government website that has all the parks. But here's a link to the conversation I have with Leroy. If you click it, it takes you to Vimeo, which is where I put all my edited videos. And so let's do this. There we go. And so there's background music. Oh, I muted it.
My name is Leroy Rebels Kate. What's today's date, Leroy? Today is 2018. April 4th. April 4th. And what I mean, this represents it's 50 years, right? That's right. So you're holding a sign. I'm a man. So we're here in Seattle. So give us your story. Well, my story is that back in the day when Martin Luther King died, I almost went to Guyana, but my family changed stuff and said they wanted to see Martin Luther King's movement. Mrs. King was putting on Resurrection City down in Washington, D.C. Reverend McKinney, he sent 7 Greyhound buses out of Seattle. I was 16 to Washington, D.C. The Panthers couldn't make it across the Frozen Bridge. They had the Army, Navy, and Air Force Marines to stop them. They couldn't stop the church. Praise God. Amen. I became an ambassador of Mount Zion. When McKinney sent me down there, I became a representative of Seattle, Washington. They have donated a park in our name. Okay. The Caton Park. And the park is right here, right? That park's right here. Okay. Wow. With all the gentrification that's been happening, Seattle's getting blown up. The more cranes here in Seattle than any other city in the United States, right? Right. And so, I mean, how do you feel about that? How do you feel the fact that Seattle is exploding? More people are moving here than ever before, and we're trying to get our history is getting overwritten.
Yeah, Seattle is a great city. It's really a great economy city. Okay, and there's a lot of people that's moving up here that just can't deal with the environment in other states.
That's true. But I mean, the prices here in Seattle are skyrocketing. The rents are going through the roof. So how's that? Where people have bought their homes and own their homes here, but the property taxes force them out. But I mean, it's kind of frustrating when you hear out that.
Yes, it's pretty frustrating to figure that out. And taxes are going up everywhere.
That is true.
Taxes I heard today are going up when they're going to start charging people $15 just to go down through town. That's a new toll. It's going to have to pay for the new bridge,
right?
The new towns.
No, $15 just to enter downtown?
Big pardon?
$15 to enter downtown?
$15 to enter downtown Seattle, Washington.
Oh, God.
They're doing it in England. And they're trying to do it in Canada and other countries.
Okay. Wow. So do you live here in Seattle now, or?
I live here in Seattle.
Okay.
My people have been here since 1887.
1887.
Senator of the United States of America, Ira Caton Rebel.
Wow.
He's got 2 books out, and one's called The Long Old Road, and the other one is called The Caton Legacy.
Okay.
And the park is dedicated in our name. And it's a shocking surprise to me because they really don't even know that the Catons exist. Wow. Because we installed the forgotten black senators of the United States of America.
Okay.
You can look that up on your phone and you'll find him right next to Obama.
Okay.
So I guess back in the days when he was a senator back in 1887, he was really considered like an Obama.
Right.
He made a lot of movements. He changed a lot of things back in those days. He fought for civil rights and the Civil War. And he was a great man.
Amazing. Amazing. So any final words? Because we're getting ready to start. So it's almost 5.
No, that's it.
That's it? Okay. And your name one more time?
Leroy K. Brothers.
Okay. And the name of your book? Said there are 2
books. The Long Old Road and The Caton Legacy.
Okay. Beautiful. Thank you for that. Okay.
So that was your interview that you had at the Caton Park there, right?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, 2018. So
yeah,
it's legacy. So,
and his family went back to 1887, I think he said.
Right.
So his family has been in the Seattle area since the 19th century. That's
exactly.
That's quite a spread.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a powerful interview, and I thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So
I just have one last question before we wrap up, and that is, what direction do you see yourself? How are you? Do you see yourself involved with VR and the social justice work? Are they interrelated, or are they separate interests that you have? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I mentioned during the presentation that, you and I did the 360 of the homeless encampment, right? And so I'm actually volunteering for Meeting for Movies, which is a nonprofit that screens movies up and down I-5 corridor pretty much, but they're in like 5 states. And I know Melinda, who is the director of it, Melinda Raban is her name. She did a documentary about 2 years ago about one of the camps in Seattle, and she actually spent time during the winter break in Seattle at the camp. And so her documentary won some awards. She's doing another one about, I think, female issues, and she's going to Italy, and she got like best director for the film that she made. But anyway, yeah, I wanted to do more things, have more people realize what's going on. I know that here in the U.S., with the whole political thing going on, the presidency, we have Dr. Paul Noes, who's going to run on the Green Party ticket, just announced it yesterday. So
Ooh.
lots of stuff happening.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Jackson, thanks so much for coming to join us today. And I think if you have any last comments, that would be great. And then I think John will
Yeah.
probably take us out.
Please.
No, I'm just looking forward to continue, working with you guys. Want to support and encourage, the next generation to keep it together. Because with the whole AI thing, I didn't really talk about that. I did talk about the layoffs, but artificial intelligence is going to be a major player, and it is already right now, but definitely in the future.
Absolutely.
I understand. I
Yeah.
mean,
We
yeah,
strongly agree with that, and so let's keep in touch,
okay,
and see how this whole thing evolves.
exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So thank you so much. Why don't we go
Thank you,
around
John.
one more time? We'll give our names, say goodbye to the camera, and give our goodbyes as we wrap up this wonderful interview. So thank you so much. Once more, my name is John Thaler. I was so happy to be here as one of the co-hosts today.
And I'm Bruce Wolcott. I'm with the Bellevue College XR Lab, and Dr. Jackson and I go way back, and it was great to get go back down memory lane with you today. And thanks for your presentation as well that you gave for Bellevue College.
Yes, and I'm Dr. Paul Jackson, aka iBrother. That is on like Facebook.com, my brother, Vimeo.com, my brother. I think on LinkedIn is iBrother. The letter I, brother. I really enjoyed sharing this time with you guys today. Looking forward to in the future.
Yes, thank you. And all of the links to what you showed and what you've been referring to will be found in the video description below if anyone wants to learn more about you. So once again, thank you to everyone who participated and helped out, and thank you to everyone who listened to the end. And with that, I will say goodbye and see you in another podcast.